What's going on, everyone? I hope you're having a good day so far, and today we are going to be talking about the housing market. So this video will probably be most interesting and most helpful to people that are looking to buy a house in the near future, and by near future, I mean within the next 2 to 3 years. But even if you're not planning on buying a house, there's still a ton of interesting topics that I'm going to cover in this video, so you should stick around. So this video is going to be kind of like going down a rabbit hole, and what I mean by that is a lot of the stuff that's going on in the housing market right now has been influenced by things that have been happening over the last 2 to 3 years, starting around the time of COVID. And it's kind of just been a domino effect. So I'm going to start from the beginning and then we're just going to work our way through up until now. Okay, so I'm going to start by explaining what the Fed is. And that's probably a term that you've heard a lot. It's in the news all the time, like the Fed did this, the Fed did that. And the Fed is talking about the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States, and they have several economic goals that they try to pursue all the time. And three of the main ones are stable economic growth, low unemployment levels, and price stability, which is inflation. Okay, now the second definition we're going to talk about is recession. So a recession is a decline in economic activity, and it's technically defined by 2 consecutive quarters of GDP contraction. So GDP stands for gross domestic product, which is the market value of all final goods and services produced and sold by the United States. And so if that's going down 2 consecutive quarters, that means the economy is shrinking, which is really bad. So some of the side effects of a recession is things like investment losses because the stock market goes down, lower demand on consumer goods, and higher unemployment. And this is kind of just a spiral of death because all of these things are related and they all affect each other. So for example, when investments go down, people are more scared to spend money, meaning that demand for goods goes down. And when demand for goods go down, it means the companies start making less money and they can't afford to pay as many employees, so they lay people off, and then that raises unemployment. So it's basically just a whole lot of bad things at one time in the economy. And so the Fed was worried that the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 could cause a recession. So the fear of this recession basically caused two things to happen. Number one is the Fed lowered interest rates, and number two is the government sent out stimulus checks. And the reason those two things happened is because they were trying to stimulate demand or get people to keep spending money and keep the economy going and growing. So when you combine that demand increase with some of the supply chain problems that were happening because of COVID, when demand is higher than supply, that means that prices are going to go up. So increasing prices are measured by the inflation number, and I'm going to show you a chart that kind of explains how that works. Okay, so this is a chart of the CPI, which stands for Consumer Price Index, and it's basically a basket of common goods and services that households in the United States purchase, and it tracks the price of those items over time. So this is the column that we're going to be looking at right here, this one I've highlighted, and it says October 2021 to October 2022. So inflation is calculated on like a rolling 12-month basis. So this is October's numbers, which obviously is a couple months old, but it's still really relevant, and it'll show you kind of how the CPI works. So as you can see on the left side, we've got all these categories and all of these items, and it has them listed and their inflation number individually. So as you can see, all items right here, this first column is 7.7%. So that means from October 2021 to 22, overall prices went up on an average 7.7%, which is a lot because the normal average is 2%. So it's almost 4 times normal. And then as we scroll down, you can see some of these items went up more than 7.7% and some went up less. So all of the food items went up a lot. Cereal and bakery products, 15.9%. Dairy products, 15.5%. A lot of the food went up a lot. Here's energy. Energy prices went up a ton. Energy was 17.6 total. Motor fuel 18, gasoline 17.5, electricity 14. And then here's a few things that went up less than 7% that kind of contribute to that average. And apparel went up 4. Used cars and trucks went up 2%. Alcoholic beverages went up 5. Rent went up 7.5%. I definitely felt that one. And then finally at the bottom, we have airline fares, which went up 43%. So obviously you can see from in the past year, prices have gone up a lot. And as I said earlier, one of the Fed's jobs is also price stability, which is to keep inflation down to a reasonable amount. And to the Fed, 8% is not a reasonable amount. So now we're kind of in the phase of, okay, so if inflation is too high, what does the Fed do about that to fix it? So the Fed has the power to adjust this thing called the federal funds rate. And the federal funds rate is the overnight rate that banks charge each other on loans. So banks have reserve requirements that they have to meet at the end of each day. And so if they're lower than their reserve requirement, they may have to borrow money from another bank overnight just to meet that requirement, and vice versa. If another bank has is overcapped on their requirement, they may loan money to another bank so they can make a little bit of a return overnight. So I think the Fed funds rate has gone from around 0.5%, so 0.5%, to like 3.5 or 4. And the problem with that is this also affects other interest rates, such as the prime rate, which is a benchmark for consumer and business loans. And it also affects the rates on mortgage-backed securities, which is kind of getting the housing market. So when banks give out loans to consumers for them to buy a house, the bank gives them the loan, and then the consumers make mortgage payments every month, right? Well, the bank doesn't just hold the loan and wait over the 30 years or the 15 years or whatever the term is for the mortgage. They don't just sit there and wait for all of those payments to come in. They actually sell those loans to other people, and then those other people are the ones that are entitled to that cash flow. So when the Fed funds rate goes up, it essentially increases the rate that people want to get on mortgage-backed securities, which means that the banks are going to charge more for mortgages, and the mortgage rate has gone from like 3% to 6.5 or 7. So the reason the Fed wants the interest rates to go higher is that it allows people to borrow less money. And when people can borrow less money, they can spend less money. And so when they spend less money, that lowers demand. And then when demand is lowered, it decreases the speed at which suppliers can increase the price, and so that lowers inflation. So I know that's a lot to follow. That's a lot of moving parts and, things that affect other things, but hopefully I explained it in a way that makes sense. So now getting into the housing market, I've explained why mortgage rates have gone up. So now let's talk about what actually happens in the housing market when mortgage rates go up. So there are adjustable rate mortgages and fixed rate mortgages, and they're exactly what they sound like. So people that bought a house in the past that have a fixed rate mortgage that may have gotten a really good interest rate on it, like 2 to 3%, those people aren't going to be affected because the rising interest rates don't change what the agreement was on their loan. So this really affects people that are either looking to sell their house in the near future or are looking to buy one in the near future. So since 2020, when the Fed lowered the interest rate to try to prevent the recession, the housing market has been going insane. People were getting mortgage rates of 2 to 3%. They were able to afford much more expensive houses than they normally would. And so that just kept driving up the price of housing. I know in my area, which is a big city, there were bidding wars on houses. So sellers would list their house for sale at a certain price, and then people would start a bidding war on that price and would outbid each other. And then the house would end up selling for like thousands and thousands of dollars higher than the asking price was. Because if a house got listed for sale and someone came along and said, oh yeah, we'll pay your asking price, someone else would just come up and say, we'll pay you $20,000 more than the asking price. And then it would just go back and forth. So that went on for a while, a year or two since COVID, and it's just made housing prices go to like astronomical levels. So normally mortgage rates and housing prices have an inverse relationship, meaning that when one is high, the other one's usually low, and vice versa. And I'm going to put a chart on the screen right now that shows you that. Okay, so here's the chart. At the top, you can see it says price of real estate versus interest rates 1988 to 2022. So the y-axis is the price of real estate, and then the x-axis is the interest rate. And as you can see, it's like an inverse curve. So when interest rates are high, the prices are usually low. And then when interest rates are low, prices are usually high. As you can see on the top left, there's the dots for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And all those years were pretty low interest rate environments, so it makes sense that the prices were high. But I don't know if you noticed that yet or not, but there's a little orange dot at the top right of the chart that says end of October 2022. And all right, we're just going to take a pause for 3 seconds, and I want you to think about what's wrong with that dot.
2 hours later.
So the problem with the dot, if you didn't figure it out, is that interest rates are almost 7% right now, and prices are also basically higher than they've ever been before. So the takeaway from this is that something has got to give. So either interest rates have to go back down or prices have to go back down. And the Fed has already said they're planning to keep increasing the Fed funds rate into the beginning of next year. So I don't think interest rates are going to go down anytime soon. So that only leaves one variable, which is the price. So the dot on that graphic was actually at the end of October, and now obviously we're in December. So prices have actually already started coming down since October, but nobody really knows how far they're going to go down. No one knows if they're going to go down to, a normal level for the current interest rate environment, or whether we're just going to have a new era of high interest rates and high housing prices. But either way, if you're looking to buy a house in the near future, that's good news for you. Even if interest rates aren't going to be going down soon, what you can do is you can still wait for prices to go down a little more. You could buy your house at a price that you like, and then you're going to have to just deal with the interest rates that are in the market right now, but you could always refinance that, down the road in a couple of years if the interest rate environment does get better. And if you don't know what refinancing is, it's essentially where you take your mortgage loan and you pay it all off with the help of another lender, and then you'll be able to get a better interest rate after that. And it does have a cost to it, but if you're able to go from a 6 to 7% interest rate down to maybe a 4 or something like that, it'll save you so much money in the long run that the short-term cost of refinancing will 100% be worth it. So take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I've never actually bought a house, but in my opinion, I think it's okay to go ahead and buy one if you're looking to stay in it for several years, because like I said, you could just refinance if interest rates get better. But if you want to buy a house and you're planning to move, in a few years and sell it, it might not be the best time to do that, because if prices keep going down, then you may have to end up selling it for less than you paid for it, and then you might get into a whole bunch of problems with whether you can pay off your loan, and it's just not a good situation to be in. So yeah, that's all I have. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This video had a bunch of topics that I had to do some refreshing on. I learned a lot of this in college, but it's been a while since I actually looked at it, so I hope I was able to explain things in a way that makes sense. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you can see when I post a video, and stay tuned for an announcement next week, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.